went into camera.
We will start. Yasmat jatam jagat sarvam yasminyeva praliyate yenedam dharyate chaiva tasmai jnanatmane namaha Ishvaro gururatmeti murti bedha vibhagine vyomavat vyapta dehaya Dakshinamurtaye namaha Taittiriya Upanishad Mayacharya prasadataha Vispashtartharuchinam hi Vyakyeyam sampraniyate Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Om Asadva idamagra asit tato vai sadajayata tatatmanag swayam kurta tasmat tat sukruta muchyata iti yadvai tat sukrutam raso vai saha rasaguhyevayam labdhvanandi bhavati kohyevanyat pranyat yadesha akasha anando nasyat yesha hyevanandayati yada hyevaisha yedasmin adrisyenatmye nirukte nilayane bhayam pratishtham vindate athaso bhayangato bhavati yada hyevaisha edasmin udaramantaram kurute athatasya bhayam bhavati tatveva bhayam vidusho manvanasya tadapyesha shloko bhavati. So, last class we saw the important message we saw was the root cause of happiness, Ananda, is Brahman only. That is what that mantra we just now saw. Raso Vaisaha Rasaghyevam Labdvanandi Bhavati. After obtaining that rasa, that essence of life, Anandhi Bhavati. Then it asks, Ko Hyevanyat Kak Pranyat. Who will be able to breathe in and breathe out? Yadesha Akasha Anando Nasyat. This God particle which manifests as Ananda, if doesn't exist, how can we even breathe in and breathe out? So last class we saw this central message that if anybody experiences Ananda, that is a time to know the Brahman is there. Because the only source of Ananda is that ultimate divinity. Now it doesn't matter, it can be Vishayananda, it can be Vidyananda, it can be Swarupananda, it can be Brahmananda, let it be anything. Any trace of Ananda is indication that the God particle is with us. So that is the message in some sense we saw last class. Now the Upanishad is proceeding to, actually there is one question which we haven't in a big way answered. If you go back, if you remember, Atato nu prashnaha uta vidwan amul lokam pretya kaschana gaschati aho vidwan amum lokam pretya kaschit samashnuta. Two questions. Avidwan amum lokam pretya kaschana gaschati. Where does he go? A person who is ignorant or has a wrong understanding of the idea, where does he go? That is one question. There is another question which says, person who knows Brahman, where does he go? That was one question which was not directly answered. The other question was answered, is Brahman exist or not? So now the Upanishad is moving forward to answer that question, saying, what is the true difference between somebody who knows and somebody who doesn't know? In fact, the first sentence of Brahmanandavalli has settled the issue. It has said, Brahmavita apnoti param, Brahmavit apnoti param. So it has settled that. We are only trying to understand it in some more detail and some more explanation and so on. So now it introduces, so today's session introduces some answers to this question. Where does this person who has known this truth going, and where does this person who does not know this truth going? It doesn't give a full answer, but it touches that particular question. Basically today's session, in one sentence, because this entire Upanishad is like that, one sentence we have to spend an hour to make a little more sense. In a sentence or two, in two sentences, it says, it basically conveys men of wisdom. What is the first sign of them? They are fearless. There is no notion of fear for them. So men of wisdom, in whom there is no fear, reaches Brahman. That is the first message it gives. And in the process of actually making that message, there is another sentence which is there, which we will see in some detail. It talks about the whole issue of fear. What is this notion of fear? Bhayam, abhayam, all those are the references that we will see. Ataso bhayam gato bhavati. Then he gets bhayam. All those are there. There are just these references to fear. So we need to elaborate. We will take probably only two sentences today, but we need to understand and elaborate what is the Upanishad saying there, because it's again profound. It said something, we will have to see it in some detail. So this is what we will see. It says, Yada he vaisha etasmin adrishye anatmye, so all those avagraha are for the akara. Anatmye, anirukte, anilayane, abhayam pratishtam vindate. If somebody is able to rest their consciousness, their thinking and their perspective in these four negative things, he says adrishya, anatmya, anilayana and abhaya. In that, if they establish, ata, thereafter, henceforth or consequently, saha abhayam gato bhavati, he will become fearless. Then the next sentence says, no, he'll get fear if he does something else. So here is the statement between a person of wisdom and a person of no wisdom. Before we get into this, I actually wanted to spend some time on this whole notion of fear. So unless we spend some time on fear, this sentence will not make sense. So I also went into the internet and I found websites talking about top 10 fears, top 10, 5 fears. I pulled all that. They were surprisingly not a list which we do not know. But I brought all of them into some framework, so that once we understand that, I think this sentence will make lot of sense to us. So we will first understand fear. So what we will do is Bhartrihari's Vairagya Shatakam has a wonderful shloka on fear. We will start with that. So beautifully, I have mentioned it a few times in the past in my Bhagavad Gita class also. So Bhartrihari talks about 7 types of fears, I think. So we will see that first, because all these are pointing to some of the things that are happening. So this is a nice shloka. It says, Bhoge Roga Bhayam, Kulachyuti Bhayam, Vitta Nripalad Bhayam, Mane Dainya Bhayam, Bale Ripuhu Bhayam, Rupe Jaraya Bhayam, Shastre Vadi Bhayam, Gune Kala Bhayam, Kaye Kritantat Bhayam. So the first 3 sentences has introduced 7 types of fears, which all of us at various stages in our life will go through. So what are those? He says, Bhoge Roga Bhayam. If people enjoy too much, particularly in a physical sense, there is a fear of disease. That is a physical sense. You forget about the physical sense. Even in a mental plane, enjoying too much by training our mind is a clear possibility for a mental disease. Because I cannot withstand failure anymore. I cannot withstand disappointments. That is also another kind of bhoga only. We want to enjoy only good things. It can be a mental state or it can be a physical state. Either ways, we will end up. So this enjoyment is ridden with the risk of fear of disease. And the disease, you call it as addiction, you call it as physical diseases, they are all bracketed under this. It only says enjoyment is not a one way street. It comes with a attendant disadvantage. That is the first fear. I think that's what the first thing. Kule Chiti Bhayam. So it says, moment you have this manitva and too much of manitva, you think you are of a high society, life is very challenged. Because all the time you think what others are going to think of me. Have I dressed properly? If somebody said something that did it really, put me down? Manitva. This Kule Chiti Bhayam is actually manitva. It's a Krishna said amanitvam, adambitvam and all that. Moment you assumed that you are of a high stature, you are actually inviting trouble. Because by the slightest thing I can put unhappiness in you. By the slightest thing I can make you upset. Because I will tell something of you which you think you are not. Because you now think you are of a high family. So that thinking of high family will also bring, so all these are buy one get one free. Bhartrihari has said long back, buy one get one free. You buy the first one, I will give you the second one. Is what he is actually saying. So if you think you are high status, then I will give you a fear which will come out of that. That is the second. Kule Chuti Bhayam. Vitta Nripalad Bhayam. Taxman. If you have too much money, then tax planning has its own attendant challenges. So Nripalaha is the king, or the statesman, or the government, whatever way you want to take. So too much of money is a source of fear. Because there are ways by which, then you have to see how to, create the black money, or how do you escape this route of, I am told that this great cricketer called, Tendulkar did everything possible to import his 1 crore car without paying duty. He went to Arun Jaitley and all these, this is what I hear, I don't know how far it is true. This is called, Vitte Nripalad Bhayam. That's what it is. I think more money can put a fear of how do you protect the money, how do you make sure it is not spilling out unnecessarily. All those fear will come. Mane Dainya Balam, right? That Kule Chiti Bhayam and Mane Dainya Bhayam are similar. One is a society, one is a self-conceit. It's a variation of the same. If you have so much of manitva, then I can upset you very easily, because what I do is not fitting to you. If you have too much of conceit, when you do a very genuine work all by yourself, You are walking on the edge of a thing because you want people to acknowledge and say that you have done a good job. And if I have not told you have done a good job, your day is gone. Finished. You are upset, you can get into depression and get admitted also. Or call some, psychological counseling. That is what happens if you have too much of conceit. So that is the mane dhainya bayam. Bale ripuhu bayam. Bale ripuhu bayam is, my grandfather used to say that, he talks about the tennis players. He always used to tell me the top is always empty. Because the person who is number one will be always displaced. This year I think some tennis players have been displaced from the number one position. So, Bale Ripuhu Bayam is, if you are a high performer, there is a fear of you being displaced by somebody who is a much better performer. That fear is always there. How do I protect this position that I have? How do I protect this strength that I have? So, that is what Bale Ripuhu Bayam. Rupe Jaraya Bayam. A good looking person's biggest concern is the wrinkles have started appearing. What do I do now? It's the biggest problem. I am very conscious of it and I get very upset about it. I get very, it's a serious issue for me. What do I do? So, Rupe Jaraya Bayam. The old age is the biggest villain for good looking, the feeling that I should look good. That biggest challenge for that is old age. Old age is Prakriti. And now we have to do age defying things, which will take us up to a point, but beyond that it may not. So, Rupe Jaraya Bayam. Shastre Vadi Bayam. A person, he says, I know everything. Yes, look around you. Somebody will challenge him. Moment somebody, because I know what I know is always relative. In a particular context, you can claim to be a very knowledgeable person. You need another context to show that you are ordinary. This is the problem. This is always a problem. If you take that too seriously. So, Shastre Vadi Bayam, Gune Kalabayam, right? When you think you are a very virtuous person, you need to be tested with some evil people. Then you know how virtuous you are. People can say, corruption is all bad and so on. But when they have to get a license, they just give the money and come. So you need such an environment in which we have to test this hypothesis. So that's what he says, Gune Kalabayam. So that is always challenged by an environment. Then we will start justifying why that's okay. But that is a fear. Then finally he says, Kaye. In this body, Kritantaha asti. Yamadharma Raja is there. So the biggest fear is fear of death. Kaye Kritantad Bhayam. Then Vairagya Shatakam Bhartrihari concludes. He says, Sarvam Vastu Bhayan Vita. What is this world here? Everything is only fear. He says, looks like the whole world is ridden with fear. Although he puts it so pessimistically, then he gives the answer finally. He says, Vairagyam eva abhayam. If you develop a sense of Vairagya, all these will disappear. How much is our own path and we can do what we can. Out of 7, 1 may knock off, 6 may remain, or 2 gets knocked off, 5 more may remain in this list. So he says the biggest abhaya is developing that dispassion, that Vairagya. So that's what he says in Vairagya Shatakam. Now if you look at types of fear, there are many different ways by which this fear happens. One set of fear is a fear arising out of identification of I with the body. Deha Abhimana. A whole lot of fears can be clubbed under that. One is afraid of thieves, thugs, lions. What is this fear of afraid of animals? It is that, I will lose my body. I will lose my life. Life means body. Or, I will be injured. This is the kind of, I will get hurt and so on. So, afraid of thieves, thugs, lions is born out of sheer ignorance. This is a matter of ignorance. Because the biggest ignorance is to say, as in Yaksha Prashna, Yamadharma Raja said, he said, there is this nice shloka which he said, Ahanyahani bhutani gachanti yamalayam, seshaha stavaram icchanti, kimascharyam itaparam. Every day people are going, Yamalayam, gachanti, ahanyahani, every day. Seshaha, balanced people like us, stavaram icchanti. They think nothing will happen to me. Firm. So that is ignorance. That is ignorance. We don't have to worry about it. We can understand that is one more thing in life. Keep it aside and keep doing what we need to do rather than worrying about it. So that is one. Fear arising out of bad habits or giving up bad habits. Either ways, there is these withdrawal symptoms is also another type of fear. And people, once they walk into it, they don't know how to come out of it, or they walk into it. All these are some sense of cowardice which must be removed. There is a fear of acting against the will of the elders, parents, teachers, scriptures, Shastra Vidim Usrujya. So what in 17th chapter of Gita, that's how it starts. Arjuna very intelligently asked the question. Shastra Vidim Usrujya Shraddhaya Yajnam Acharayati. He says, one person does not follow any of the Shastra, but with Shraddha he does Yajna. So is that person Sattva, Rajas or Tamas? He asked about the person. Rest of the chapter and 40 more slokas in chapter 18, Krishna actually talked about 3 types of Shraddha. He said, your question is an oxymoron. If you have Shraddha, it cannot be that you would have actually, it's like what we are saying today. No, I don't know God, nothing. I don't believe any of the customs, but I am a good person. That is, there is a little bit of an issue there. One has to dig deep into that position and understand why these two doesn't necessarily. A lot of people feel like saying, no, I don't believe in any of these scriptures. All that you throw, but I am a good person. I will have a honest living. They may be very honest living, dharmic in terms of. I am not at all saying that, but our scriptural, since they throughout the scriptures they don't understand. They can be good. Only thing is they can never escape, they can never develop escape velocity to get out of this birth and death. They will come back and back and back, have a good life. But you can endlessly do it. There is no way you can get out of it. If you have to get out of it, you need something else, which they don't want to see and so on. So like that. So different issues are there. But at least, this is from Swami Ram Sukdas, I took this, I like this. He said this kind of fear is healthy because he says this fear eventually will lead to a state of fearlessness. So this will be a passing fear. Well, it is a stage of fear, but that fear will lead you to do something, and out of it you will, it is like bootstrapping. You bootstrap yourself out of a certain condition. So he says that is all right. He talks about these are the external fear. Then he talks about internal fear. So he says when one is engaged in evil deeds, forbidden actions which involve sin and injustice and atrocity, he says there is a sort of an internal fear, and that happens, and he says this we engage in these activities because there is affinity to body, or this manitva, this conceit, or this bhoga, this desire to have pleasure. All those might. I looked at this shloka in Uddhava Gita. It says, Shokaha, Harshaha, Bayaha, Krodaha, Lobaha, Mohaha, Sprihadayaha, Etal, Adi, Adayaha. See, he has put a few of them. He says Shoka, Harsha, Baya is also there, Krodha, Loba, Moha, and Spriha. There is too much of this energy sometimes to do things. He says, some of them are good, some of them are bad. I've just put all of them there. He says, ahankarasya drishyante. He says, most of these are, janma mrityuhu. Na atmanaha. He says, it doesn't, grow your vyaktitva. Many of them has a long-term effect of actually destroying your very, what you could have done in this janma, that would maybe challenged. It doesn't add to this development of the, so that affinity to body, honor are all because of that ahankara. So the ahankarasya drishyante janma mrityuhu chana atmana is what he says. Of course, Ram Sukdas said the whole idea of God realization is it can help us take out of this fear. It can show us a path by which we can get out of some of this fear. Then I remember this shloka. This is a very important shloka in Uddakanta. When Vibhishana came for Sharanagata. So there is a bit of a conversation. What do we do? Because many are saying we should not allow him. Nala, and all these people are actually saying to Rama, they are voicing their opinion because Sugriva is there, all these are there. That time, this is a shloka Rama says, this is a very famous shloka. It says, Sakruteva prapannaya tavasmiti chayachate abhayam sarvabhutebhyah dadami etat vratam mama. So Rama says that when people have come unto me, saying, I surrender unto you, he says, it doesn't matter who they are. It is my responsibility to take care of their welfare. Yoga kshemam vahamyam. Ananya chintayanto mam yejana paripasate. Tesham nitya abhyuktanam yoga kshemam vahamyam. That's another version of that. So if we can unconditionally surrender, which we may find it very difficult, but if we can unconditionally surrender and have that belief that it is for good, then it will happen. So that's what he was saying. So I then went into the internet and said, what are these top 10 fears, top 5 fears, and I read a little bit on, there's a Wikipedia page on fear, phobia. I just wanted to understand what is the current literature saying about fear. And after I went through all of them, I finally put them under 4 categories. Fear, according to me, can be under 4 major categories. I want to explain those categories in some detail because we are all going through that. So the first category is in terms of, these are all I found in the internet top 10. In several sites I actually saw. He said there is a fear of failure, fear of rejection and ridicule, fear of loneliness. It's a big issue in Western society. Fear of loneliness is a big issue in Western society. So there is a big demand for pets now because they don't know how to. The socialization part is severely challenged now because you are so conscious of what others are saying and so what they will think. So better you keep off from all the people, have a very formal relationship, and then rest you. So you have to have a pet and all that. The loneliness is a big issue in a certain social plane, which I see in some of the Western societies. Fear of separation, fear of disappointment, loss of autonomy, and fear of exposure of something that I am doing. I do something wrong, there is a fear of do I get exposed. So I have to put a split personality now. At one level I should appear to be a very nice person, but I should privately do whatever I want to do. That's the fear of exposure. So if you look at many of these fears, fear of being rejected by people around me, by my society, my colleagues, my cohorts, there are very different kinds of fear. Students face this, people face it in the office, people face it in the family. They face it in a social sort of setting. So there is a whole lot of fear. Now if you analyze these different, so in each one of them there are examples. Fear of failure. What I do, will I fail? That's the biggest thing. In Bhagavad Gita also, great amount of these are all being, touched from a different perspective. So if you look at all these types of fears, what you will actually find is, this is happening because there is a second entity. If there is no second entity, most of this will go. The question of loneliness is not there. The fear of failure per se is not a failure. The fear of failure is that failure in the eyes of others. If I am the only one, where is this failure and success? These value judgments that are coming, many of them are value judgments. Many of these value judgments which either others make or I think others will make. So there are 3 categories. Either others make, or I think others will make. They may not, but I think. Or I make myself, thinking of certain possibilities which exist outside and so on. So if you actually look at all these type of fears are coming from the notion of duality. We have consciously felt that the world is a dual. Dual means me and the rest. I exist, something else also exists. That will, moment something else exists in addition to me, then there is this fear. So it will be ego threatening. This fear manifests because it is threatening my ego, because it is challenging my ego, and because it threatens my ego, then my mind starts mapping some outcomes. And mind only dictates so many orders to the karmendriyas and the jnanendriyas and so on. Buddha, Chitta and Ahankara are Buddhi, Chitta and Ahankara are supplying whatever needs to be supplied. So this category of fears, fear that we go through, there may be many more. I have just, whatever I found, I have put it here. All these fear emanate from the notion of duality. So unless we are able to inquire and come to our own conclusions, I don't think I will be able to, tell something and say everybody must agree to it. But we must inquire the notion of duality. Unless we are able to inquire the notion of duality, we will never be able to solve this fear. This fear will exist. It may be a matter of degree. It may be a matter of which one is there today, which one is there tomorrow afternoon, which one is there day after tomorrow morning. But this set of fears are emanating out of the notion of duality which we are all experiencing. So unless we question that and modify that part of the reality, we will never be able to handle this fear. Then there is a second set of fear which I found in that list and all that. Fear of death, fear of pain, fear of diseases, ... We can put many more. I mean, biggest problem, one of the biggest problem is, do I have blood pressure? Am I diabetic? Some people actually with that fear, they don't check and get into much bigger trouble. That's another question. Some people don't go there because of the fear. Some people after going there develop the fear. Some people are fortunate, they can postpone it for some more time. Whatever. So there are different kinds like this. So there is a fear. You have surgery to be done. You have fear whether everything will be alright. Or there is a treatment which we take. There is this fear. Because, so those are all of these categories. Fear of deformities, physical, mental, whatever. Here I meant the physical deformity, mental deformities are there. These are the physical deformities and that variety. Fear of violence, fear of attack. If you look at all of them, the genesis of all these fear is Deha Abhimana. If Deha Abhimana is not a reality, many of these fear may not be there. Who knows? Very famous example is Ramana Maharishi said, you do no anesthesia, you do whatever you want to do. I am not the body. Deham naham. That is the idea. I am not the body is not mine, the body is not for me. So unless one travels again on this plane, how far we can travel, how much we can agree, how much we can convince ourselves, these are all individual choices. But as long as we have Deha Abhimana and the degree, how much it is, the degree of Deha Abhimana will always result in this type of fear. I don't think we can escape from this. Because this Deha Abhimana actually pushes us into a sense of permanence. It really pushes us into a sense of permanence. Look at chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. From that 16th shloka to 30th shloka. The first thing which Krishna talked to Arjuna. In fact, he said, Natveham, you are not there, I was not there. That's how he started. He said, the first thing he said was, Prajnavadamsa bhashase, Gatasun, Agatasun, se nanusochanti panditaha. That's the first, the official, the teaching which starts from 11th shloka in chapter 2. This is the first shloka. He says, Ashochan anvashochastvam, Prajnavadamsa bhashase. You talk as though you know everything. Ashochan anvashochastvam. You are thinking of things which you should not be thinking. That's how Krishna started there. Ashochan anvashochastvam prajnavadamsya bhashate gatasun agatasunsa. People who have come and gone, people who are going to come later, agatasun. Na anushochanti panditaha. Panditas don't bother about who came and went, who is going to come 100 years from now, 1000 years from now. They are not bothered about that. The point is, from there it started. Then there are, it talks about abhyaktani cha bhutani vaktyamadhyani bharata nasate vidyato bhavaha nabhavo vidyate sataha vasamchi janani yata vihaya akleshoyam adehoyam. All those, there are shloka 11 to 30 talked about this middle part. First thing Krishna said is, if you have too much of Deha Abhimana, you will be ridden with fear. Good luck. Arjuna's biggest problem was the fear, na? Arjuna's biggest problem was the fear. He couldn't handle because of fear. So Krishna talked about this. That's why in chapter 12 also he said, Kleshaha adhikataraha tesham abhyakta asakta chetasam abhyakta bhi gatir dukkam dehavadbihi bijayate. Krishna, Arjuna asked, should I do nirguna or saguna and all that? He said, nirguna and all, don't talk now. Because if you have to do a nirguna upasana, you have to completely ignore the existence of your body itself. Dehavadbihi kleshaha adhikataraha tesham, for such people. Avyakta sakta chetasam. Why? Avyakta bihi gatihi dukkam. For whom? Dehavadbihi. He didn't say for everyone. People who are little body conscious, that will come in the way. So that is another set of fear. So another set of fear are body oriented. Again, how much we can understand, how much we can challenge this mental model, how much we can progress is a choice we will have to make. So that is the second set of fear out of that list which I was able to put it under this category. Then there is a third set of fear, fear of animals, fear of unknown, fear of the unknown. We say fear of the unknown. A student wants to go and write an exam, there is this fear of the unknown. Doctor has asked me to come to do a test because he thinks there is something wrong with my heart. There is a fear of the unknown for me. It is just fear of the unknown. And the more unknown it is, the more I start imagining. And I, think of things which are not there. Two weeks back I quoted that shloka from Panchadashi, that a son who is not dead, he heard a message, son is dead, and he was in great fear. And in another case, the son who is dead, he thinks the son is not dead, he is enjoying. So it is unknown. It wrongly maps actually. So fear of the uncertainty, fear arising out of uncertainty, fear arising out of non-gain. I put some effort, I don't know what I will get. That introduces a certain fear. In office parlance, I've done a lot of work. This is the annual ACR time. Will I get my promotion and pay hike? There is a certain fear. There is a certain kind of a challenge that we go through. So fear of non-gain, fear of losing freedom. All these are coming because we don't have the right knowledge with us as to the reality. Our understanding of the reality is contrived. There is this whole deal of ignorance. There is a lot of ignorance in us which introduces. That's why a person who is completely not read of the modern science and technology and so on, for him, if you put a machine which makes some strange sound and then some light is coming out of it and there is some noise, something goes through, something comes out of something, he will have fear. That fear is out of ignorance. He may have a lot of wisdom. Since he doesn't know this, it is all fear. Correct? It's all fear. So there is this fear of unknown, fear of uncertainty. All these are coming out of ignorance, which is because of lack of knowledge. And so we start imagining quite a few things. So the only way we can handle this fear is to be educated on whatever it is. That's the only way. The more we are educated on that, the lesser will be the fear which may emanate out of this. That's the only way. There is no other way. There is no other magic to do away with this fear. It is all about getting that knowledge. For whatever that domain where it is getting us fear, you have to get knowledgeable on that. That's the only way you can address this fear. Then there is this fear of bad habits that we get into, and then there is this nagging feeling: am I doing the right thing? Why am I? It may be brashtachara, it may be in a certain community contemporary standards doing a few things which are considered to be wrong. It may vary from society, but in a relative plane, whatever you have. So there is this fear arising out of bad habits, fear arising out of disobeying elders, scriptures, teachers, whatever. You can add all of them. It's a whole lot of set of fear of breaking rules, right? All these, fear of breaking rules includes also driving the scooter without a helmet. It's also under that category only. Because anytime somebody catches 300 rupees, I have to give, or 500, there is some fear. There is some sort of a fear even there. So all these, so one can have any more list in any of these. I have only taken a few to sort of give a little sense. So these fear can never be overcome, and these fear happen primarily because there is an absence of a framework to our living. Or the framework is, I wouldn't say absent, maybe it is inappropriate. It's not proper. So that leads us to no ideas of right living, and so the do's and don'ts get very ambiguous in life. That instills a certain fear. Bhrishtachara is a very good example, right? Breaking the signal and then going is another example, and all these kinds of examples are there. So there, the only way we can sort out this, get out of this fear, is only by fixing the framework. There is no way we can fix the framework. I am not saying you will do or not do. I am saying after you do, the fear comes. I am talking about how do you address the fear. The fear is not addressed by paying some more money or sorting it out, one with the credit, with the debit, nothing of that kind. This fear will disappear only when there is the framework of what I will call it as Purusharthas. We have a nice framework. The 4 Purusharthas are to be understood. The 4 Purusharthas are proper. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha Purusharthas are understood. Many of these will be certainly the living. Vidhi and Nisheda. That is why the Shastra Vidhiyas are coming. There are Vidhis and Nishedas of anything. And there are these nice structures which people have thought about, which can take fear out of us, make us a little more peaceful. Dharma, Artha, Kama. Dharma as a Purushartha. Dharmasya anusara artha, arthasya anusara kama. That kind of tying of one Purushartha to the other in a strict order can actually obviate a lot of fear which we may go through otherwise. So this kind of fear that we are talking about are the fears arising out of a bad framework. So the only way we can solve it is achara vicharas. If I have to use another word like that, the only way you can, you have to imbibe a certain level of achara and vichara. Otherwise this fear can never be eliminated. So if you look at each one of them, the genesis of a fear cannot be removed until we address that. So until we address the notion of duality, the first category of fear can never go. Whatever you do, the first category of fear will never go if you don't address duality. Second category of fear will never go if the body consciousness is at a very high level. The only way that fear will be reducing is when this body consciousness also reduces. Otherwise it will not. And so on. The other two. Now the question is, how do we get that? How do we, so we have a certain position in all these 4. We may have a certain position on the notion of duality as we have understood life. It's very personal. And it is no way dependent, the parentage and tutelage can modify, but each Vyaktitva brings a unique set of, if you take each one of these 4 parameters as a 0 to 100, each one of us have a sliding scale and a position there. That is our disposition. So we will have to now start moving this sliding scale. The question is, how do you move the sliding scale? I think that is where this whole knowledge helps. A robust framework which can actually clarify all the 4. A framework must be able to clarify what is this notion of duality. It should be inquired dispassionately and logically. It should be shaken at its very bottom and say, so what? What is it? So that we need a framework. We need a framework for how real and genuine are these body consciousness, or how real, what is this level of ignorance and what is the knowledge, right? And what is the absence of framework, the Purushartha. All these, in a way, if you look at our body of knowledge, the way we have looked at it, I think all of them stem from a fundamental understanding of this triangle of Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. Much depends on how did we understand these 3. What paradigm we believed in connecting these 3. the paradigm that we have used, the paradigm which convinces us, will tell us where are we in these four. Where are we with respect to duality? Where are we with respect to body consciousness? Where are we with respect to the the ignorance that plays out? And where are we with respect to absence? So now Vidya, a lot of knowledge system available, which are all emanating from this fundamental idea that a robust framework of connecting an individual with the Ishvara and the Jagat, if that part is well done, it may in turn feed into these four and help us take our own positions. So these Shruti mantras are meant for it. The Shruti mantras are actually trying to do these kinds of helps us with arguments. Taittiriya Upanishad is doing that. It is addressing some of these. So the Shruti mantras, the Purva Mimamsas and the Uttara Mimamsas are all actually only doing this. It is supplying us with ideas which we will have to agree. Maybe we disagree, and which means that's not there. We take a certain position here, and all that will actually play out in terms of what is happening. So, in summary, this is something which I found in that book. It's very nice. I really liked it. He said, as long as a human being does not know what is worth doing. This is where the differences start happening. We think this is what is worth doing. Maybe it doesn't fit into the framework. Therefore, it might introduce a certain kind of a fear. So, as long as a human being does not do what is worth doing, does not know what is worth knowing, so the framework is ambiguous, the do's and don'ts are messed up. We think body is, all that. In Chandogya Upanishad, there is this end of Chandogya Upanishad. The 8th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad starts with the story, and the entire 8th chapter is only about the body consciousness. There is one framework which is coming there. This Virochana. Among the Devas and the Asuras, they were actually trying to have a discussion. They try to understand what is this ultimate thing that we should all strive to know. We are all doing all kinds of things, but what is that ultimate thing for which we need to struggle and get to know? So let us try to get what is the ultimate thing to know. Every Upanishad has that question actually in several ways. So finally, among the Devas, Indra said, let me go and find out. Prajapati might know. He is the person to ask. So among the Devas, Indra says, I will go. Among the Asuras, Virochana says, I will go. So both of them go, and then go to Prajapati. Prajapati says, stay here for 25 years. So stay there for 25 years, and after 25 years, one day they call them. Call both of them. Prajapati calls. He says, come fully decorated, well dressed up, come very well appointed, because now you want to know the ultimate truth. Come properly for the occasion. Very well dressed up and all that. So they all look at the best of what they can look like. Both of them come, and Prajapati takes both of them to a sheet of water and say, look at there, you know what is ultimate truth to know. So both of them look at there, and they look their reflection. So they have understood what is to be known. The ultimate is the body. With all its grandeur and splendor, they saw it. That's what they saw when they saw in the sheet of water. So they both thanked Prajapati, 25 years of hard work. Thank you. Both went away. But Virochana never came back. He understood the ultimate thing in life is body. So he went away. But this Indra had a lot of conflict. He said, no, it doesn't seem to work. Because after some time, Jara Bhayam, Kaye, Kritantat Bhayam, all those are coming. So he was not very happy. He was again and again he thinks this is not alright. There's something wrong. So he comes back to Prajapati. Prajapati says another 25 years. So like that 101 years he was there, 4 times. Next time he says something and sends him, he says alright, and then he goes. Again he thinks this is not it. So this entire knowledge is actually telling us a lot of anecdotes, telling us a lot of logical arguments, gives us a lot of room for thinking, and all these are actually telling us, inquire to yourself these 4 things. And that's where that model of Jiva Jagat Ishvara evolves through many of these scriptures. That's why we should know what is worth knowing. Until then fear will be there. Right? And then we should gain what we should gain. So the biggest problem is that we gain something which is not permanent. We should know what is Nitya and Anitya. Nitya Vastu and Anitya Vastu we should know. There is no point in going after Anitya Vastu. Whereas a lot of our effort on a simple mundane life, we are actually putting so much. I was hearing pravachan of someone, very nicely he said there is something called wealth, there is something called God. He said God has to be reflected, kept, preserved, kept ashraya. You have to do an ashraya of devata, and you should do a vyavahara of wealth. He said today somehow we have turned the table. We are doing the ashraya of wealth. This gives me 25%, this farmhouse will have appreciated 30%, this will happen, that will happen. So we want to preserve the wealth and put it into a locker, pay the locker fee and all that, many things which we do. So we do an ashraya of dana, and God has become a very transactional entity. Some of the temples are very good in doing it. It has become really a transactional entity in many ways. So, moment on the Navaratri birth, in fact, I am stunned by some of the acharyas also do it. I don't know why they are doing. They put some 25 yajnas. You get, for some of the yajnas, I agree 1 or 2 yajnas out of the 25 list. Those which I have my mano vedana. I am feeling very bad and I don't have a child. I am just giving an example. Let's say I don't have a child, or I am all the time ridden with diseases. These are things which are even an average person, an above average person is shaken. So for that, if you do yajna, I am able to even take it. So there is Kubera Lakshmi yajna and this yajna and that yajna. If acharyas are saying, grow your wealth and I will pay 1,000 rupee kanike, chitike togoli, all these. So, we have done a big vyavahara of God. On a much bigger note, I see, proportion is very large there. Whereas Putra Santana, Homa and all, I am okay with some of those because I am really genuinely feeling. But you have a whole lot of list, and this list is ideally have to be empty, but at least 1 or 2 you can allow. But so we should know what we should gain. So he nicely says, as long as a human being does not know what is worth knowing, does not do what he is doing, what is to be done, and does not gain what is worth gaining, fear will be with that person forever. I think it's a very axiomatic statement. It's a very axiomatic statement. It's a very generic statement. We can, take positions on it and understand it, but I think it's a very nice statement to say fear. And Hitopadesha, I saw this shloka. Ahara nidra bhaya maitunani samamyam yetad pashubir naranam. It's a famous shloka again. It's a very famous shloka. Jnanam naranam adhiko viseshaha jnanena hinaha pashubihi samanaha. So I think we must know what is worth knowing. We need the right framework. Only way we can do away with fear is not by, not only, I would not say not only by breaking coconut every Friday or kanike chiti. I think all that we should do. But I think we should endear to understand this Jiva Jagat Ishvara plane. That right knowledge, if you don't endear for it, our quotient of fear will not come down. So much he thought we'll talk about fear, and then one sentence will make a lot of sense. Then he says, Yada, at that time when he indeed, eva, yeshaha, that person, okay, yetasmin, in this, in what? That what is defined by four attributes there. Adrishye, that which is not seeable, invisible. Drishya, adrishya. Adrishye, anatmye, which is not embodied. Atma here means body, it's not soul in this context. Anatmye, anirukte, that which cannot be precisely determined, established. Anilayane, that which is abodeless. There is no fixed place, like that. and abhayam, that which is embodiment of, which is nothing but fearlessness. So there are 4 properties. He says a person, and abhayam pratishtam vindate, he is able to fix himself into these 4 into that which is characterized by these 4 attributes, which is Brahman. It says adrishye, that which is not seeable. If you say it is not seeable, what do we mean? In order something to be visible, it should have a shape and a form. So by saying adrishye, what it says is it is guna, rahita, nirguna. It is without any attribute, that which is attributeless, which can cause a lot of attributes, but it by itself is attributeless. So you can't see it. Vikara is not there. Vikara is not there. It is not, having all these upadhi. It doesn't show up. Yeah, all those Shad Vikaras are not part of it. So it's gone. Anatme, that's why it is, when something is not visible, it is not embodied also. Correct? And then Anirukte, so if it doesn't have attributes, if it is formless and shapeless, how are you going to precisely, this is the biggest challenge in Vedanta literature. You are talking about something which you cannot talk about. So you can talk about, you can't talk it. You can talk about it in all different ways and get into more and more complicated vocabulary, which can confuse us also at times. But that is a limitation. So it is Anirukta and it is Anilayana. See, I was just reading Chinmaya's commentary on Taittiriya Upanishad in this particular mantra. He put a nice thing. He says, the abode for a parrot is the cage. The abode for the cage is the house or that building, whatever. The abode for that building is the roof. The abode for the roof is, he says, this dome called sky, let us take approximately, he says, what is the abode for that? I don't know. So that principle, which is the abode of everything, but it doesn't have to have an abode. It is abode for everything, but it is abodeless. Brahmanandavalli Upanishad, there are nice mantras like that, which all look, in a way confusing, but it is. I always say this, electricity is both, it is visible, but it is not visible. It is visible because you are seeing it, expressing it through it. I say it heats, but it does not heat. Because by itself electricity does not heat, but you pass it through an element, it will heat. It cools not. By itself it doesn't cool, but you put it into the AC, it will cool. So like that, it's abodeless, but it will be the abode for everyone. It expresses and manifests in different ways. If a person is able to fix his entire consciousness and thinking and perception and perspectives into this, which means Brahmavit apnoti, he has really experienced it and understood it and lived through that kind of a living, all the fear will go, body consciousness will go, all the 4 will go, the notion of duality will go, the notion of body consciousness will go, the nitya anitya viveka will happen, and all these do's and don'ts of life will all come, because there is a different platform on which he is able to see himself in the context of the other 2. Saha Ata, thereafter, when he reaches that state, Abhayam Gato Bhavati, he becomes fearless. So in other words, Shruti is saying, where will a Vidwan go? Uta Vidwan Amul Lokam Petya Kaschit Samashnuta U. He says, a person who is able to understand this will truly become fearless. And if he truly become fearless, means he can engage in activities without fear or favor or anything. He is embodiment of freedom now. See, we are not free because fear is the degrees of freedom which is taken out of us. If we have absolutely no fear, we will be a newborn child, a child which starts imbibing these worldly things. Until then it is like that. It's fearless, it is pure Paramatman. Moment the vasanas start coming out, it starts getting the fear. Moment as we grow, fear engulfs us. Actually fear engulfs us. So it is actually not growth. From a Shishu is born, it is shrinkage, not growth. Because we become constrained in life. Because all these mental models start coming onto us, all these different types of fear that we saw, they all will actually show up. So here he is saying the true growth for an individual is to reach a state of fearlessness. And the state of fearlessness is living through the experience of godliness in us. So that is what this mantra actually says. So it has a counter mantra to it, which is what happened, how he gets fear. This is a state of fearlessness. How do you get a state of fear? That is the next mantra, next sentence in this mantra, which we will see in the next class. We will stop here.